Yo, guys, what is good? Welcome to FL Teams. My name is Dylan Spaulding. I am the official USF writer for FL Teams, USF contributor, whatever you want to call me. It doesn't matter. But I am the USF coverage guy for FL Teams. And as we are wrapping up the football season with only a matter of 3 to 4 weeks left in the football season, there is new sports on the horizon for USF, and that is men's and women's basketball. Now, today we won't be talking about the women's basketball, but we will be talking about that in a separate video and a separate podcast in a season preview for them. But today we get you guys ready for the upcoming USF men's basketball season with the USF insider, my good friend and actually season ticket holder. He'll be at every, or a majority, I should say, of the USF men's basketball games. Mr. Chris Everidge. Chris, so happy to have you on the show. Welcome to FL Teams. Obviously, you're a guest on the show today. Happy to have you on and get to talk some USF men's basketball. We were at the USF game yesterday. I did not expect to go to the USF game yesterday because I was actually planning on going to PHSC to do some stuff, but it kind of ended up coming up last minute, so I ended up just going to the game. Chris, how are you this evening or this
Doing
afternoon?
well. Excited to talk some USF men's basketball today. We got a
Yep.
lot of hope on the horizon for a team that only won 8 games last year, but very excited to talk about USF and really to maybe talk a little bit about Tampa, who we just saw yesterday. Maybe just frick a little bit.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about some USF basketball for sure on the show. As you mentioned, UT as well, another Florida team. So yeah, a lot to get into today here on the opening of the show as the USF Bulls kick off their season Monday night against the Southeast Missouri. If I'm not mistaken, it's the Hawks, I believe, or some type of bird of some sort. It is the Hawks. Okay, let's go. It's the Southeast Missouri Hawks. That was a complete guess there on the team name. But regardless of that, it should be an exciting season of USF basketball. And I guess we'll kind of begin things off with that because you look at this USF team, it was a rough year last year, 8-22 last season in 2021, 2022. You head into this season, similar to USF football, there's some exciting stuff happening with USF base or basketball. A couple transfers coming into this program. So, Chris, I'll kind of start off with you, man. What do you think about some of these new transfers? We saw a lot of them last night. A lot of these guys played last night. Tyler Harris was one of them. He played pretty well. I think he had a few shots off that were pretty nice. So overall, what do you take away from some of the transfers that we saw last night? And I guess we'll be getting off too. What do you take away from the game last night against UT?
Yeah, I'll specifically talk about the transfers. It's what I'm most excited for. I first want to give a shout out to Scott Wagers for convincing. He is the head of recruitment for USF men's basketball. He convinced these three guys, really three great players. You get a point guard from Memphis, which is of course a conference team, a great player in Tyler Harris, and then you bring in Keyshawn Bryant from South Carolina, and then my personal favorite is Sultan Miguel because he is a sophomore. He's probably the best one of these three transfers, and he's the one that's going to be on the team for potentially 2 or 3 more years compared to the both of the seniors that came in just to play for this year. But really, all three performed pretty well last night. Just looking at the stat line for minutes, Miguel had 28, Bryant had 29, and Harris had 26. So we were wondering if these transfers were going to be starters, and it looks just like it. I mean, you get three guys that weren't on the team last year, and they're three highest guys in terms of minutes. So it's really going to come down to how well these three transfers played. And it was a rough first half for them, but this is the first preseason game that they're having.
Yep.
But overall, I would say the three transfers, they did pretty well. They all have good size. Miguel led us in points, along with Big Russ Chua, as they call him. Keyshawn Bryant had two amazing slam dunks right in front of us.
Yeah.
And then Tyler Harris, he was one of the only players who could actually make a three-point shot on the team last night, which I'm sure we'll want to talk about. But these three transfers, man, you put that along with Russell Chua, and you have a pretty big starting lineup all of a sudden, an experienced starting lineup. And I think that's why we're probably projected to at least get into some sort of tournament play, whether that's a CBI or NIT or American Conference. So yeah, that's my opinion on them. And once again, shout out to Scott Wagers for convincing them to come.
Yeah, I gotta give credit to this USF team, making some big transfers over the off season, and to add that in with a lot of the guys that they already have now, who some of them are actually transfers from D1 top Power Five programs, if you will. Being a football fan, you think of Power Five being the Big 12, and I think that even still exists somewhat in basketball, even though I would say there's probably some other programs like the Big East is probably it could be contested in a Power Five realm in terms of basketball play and such. But yeah, this team, the first half, obviously, yesterday, we were watching the game yesterday, and the first half was definitely not what you were hoping for. And give credit to University of Tampa yesterday, man. University of Tampa came out just like they did last week against Stetson and really gave USF a run for their money. I mean, to say that University of Tampa was a threat is an understatement. They definitely played good enough to win this exhibition game. They played, as if this was a regular season game. And I'll tell you what, as the game progressed, the crowd got into this game as well. It felt like a very lively atmosphere yesterday in Yingling Center, even though it was only about, I would say 3/4 of the way filled in the lower bowl. And then obviously the upper deck was pretty empty. But for the most part, man, these guys look good. I think, they're going to gel. Obviously, you got a team like Stetson, for example, who have two exhibition games. So the second exhibition game, they have a little bit more, of gelling going on. But, I give credit. They gelled well together, especially in the second half of action. A lot of good fast break opportunities. The team was actually passing the ball around a little bit as well and making some smart decisions offensively. And I really liked what I saw from the USF Bulls last night, especially in the second half. First half was a little bit rough. They were trying to get their feet wet a little bit, but I think the second half they really got going and things were definitely clicking for the USF Bulls offensively.
And yeah, that first half, second half, it is huge, as you mentioned, with Tampa having already played. We didn't, I mean, you can just look at the numbers. We shot 29% in the first half. We scored 23 points to their 36, which is, it's just not what you want to see. But then in the second half, we finally made threes. We made all the free throws except one. We shot 50%, and that led to 43 points. And if you can do that in both halves and score 86, there's not a lot of teams you're going to lose to, especially when you play the out of conference competition. But shout out to Tampa, though. They played well. And we play Stetson next Monday, not this upcoming the season opener, but next Monday. And that game might have got a little bit closer now that we saw how Tampa performed against both of them, which is interesting to see. But yeah, Tampa played good. We played good in the second half, but you'll lose every game if we played like we did in the first half, and you'll win most of them if you did like how you did in the second half. So
yeah. Yeah, definitely for sure, man. I mean, I still have to say though the 3-point shooting was pretty atrocious in terms of the numbers. Like just to see like 2 for 18, I believe it was the final line there for the 3-point shots that were off. I mean, that's still not very good. I mean, the 3-point shooting was a tad bit better. Obviously, they went 2 for 6 in the second half of action, but that definitely was the Achilles heel for this team. And you could kind of tell that this is going to be a team that's going to drive in, try to, shoot the easy basket up at the, up at the rim and really go for those easy points. And, there was a lot of second chance opportunities that the Bulls had as well, that they weren't able to capitalize on, but that also could be something that, maybe down the line as the season progresses and as they, continue to play and get things kind of squared away, maybe they'll be more better with some of their second chance opportunities, but because they got a lot of second chance opportunities, especially last night, and they just couldn't capitalize. That was another Achilles heel for me as well last night.
Well, and you talk about the 3-point, how we went 2 for 18. The average 3-point shot is it's a bit higher in the NBA, but at least in college, it's about 30%.
Yeah.
And we went 0 for 12. 30% said we make 4. That's 12 points. We win this game by 17 instead of 5 if we just shot normally in that first half. And that's obviously a big difference, 17 points to 5. So I think you have to be a little optimistic. You can't really look at this game and say, again, like give a conclusion on how we're going to shoot the ball 3-point wise or how we're going to be with turnovers. This is a preseason game,
Yeah,
but
sure.
definitely have to make sure those 3-point shots like they were in the second half,
It
because we
was
missed a lot of wide open ones.
Yeah, it was a preseason game. Yeah, we lost the camera there. It was a preseason game, man, but it felt more like a regular season type of like play, if you will, in terms of like UT definitely played like regular season form. You could tell UT really wanted to win this game, like they did last week against Stetson. I mean, you got to take for granted. I mean, again, UT almost beat two D1 opponents in exhibition play. That means a lot for that program, if they could beat those schools, because for them, those are some of the bigger games that they have on the schedule, because you don't get to play D1 opponents all too often. So it's very interesting to see. Again, the game was exciting. It was good to watch, and there was a lot of energy from that USF bench as well, as the team kind of got, hot a little bit towards the end of the game. Only 5 minutes they led, but hey, it worked out. That's all you need. That's all you need to win a ball game. If you could get the final bucket in and you win, that's all that matters. So the Bulls able to get the win yesterday against UT, heading into Monday's home opener. And Chris, I guess we'll kind of close things out on the UT game and kind of head into some conference outlooks, if you will, in terms of where this team, we see them finishing up at by the end of this season. Now, this is a very tough conference. You got Houston, you got Memphis, who are going to be very competitive. UCF is another interesting team as well. Wichita State, you kind of never know what they're going to be like every year. It feels like they're sometimes very hot in the AAC conference. Where do you see USF finishing up? Obviously, there have been reports that they're kind of a back half middle tier type of team at best right now from what they said, but there's a lot of, up, there's a lot of up, if you will, for this team in terms of, there's a lot of positives that could be made for this USF team to possibly even be a top contender in the AAC if this team gels and really, performs on all cylinders.
And that's where I think those 3 transfers come in, because they are from big programs like Memphis, South Carolina, Kansas State. 2 of those teams are in the tournament recently. So, and you're talking about an American conference that's probably going to have 3 tournament players, especially Houston, who actually comes in as a March Madness, number 1 seed potentially.
Yep.
And so that's really tough. You have that game. In fact, we only have a 6% chance to win that game, but it's such a tight American. We're projected 6 wins to make the American tournament. You need 8. So, can you steal a couple of those games, and all of a sudden now you're in the tournament for the American, and then who knows what happens from there? Maybe you steal a game, you're in the American semis, and depending on how you do there, then now all of a sudden you're in the CBI or NIT, right?
Yep.
So it's very important to steal games in the conference. I'm looking at the ones that we have a good chance to steal. UCF, of course, we're always going to play UCF close. It's a rival. Wichita State on the road, we have a good chance of beating Cincinnati at home. But it's definitely not going to be easy. South Florida can definitely be the worst team in the American if things go south. But I could also see them doing better than maybe Temple or SMU, UCF, Tulsa, and that's what you need to be, really. But it's not an easy schedule, and it doesn't help that some of the out of conference games are ones that are definitely tough, like Auburn. But you have to steal. That's just my biggest thing I'm going to say. You have to steal games in the American in order to potentially get into the American tournament, and then anything can happen from there. But you have to win the games at home against the lower teams, and you got to steal some for the better teams.
I agree with that completely. It's got to be similar. I mean, if you want to at least get, I think if this team wants to at least get to, playing for something and come postseason time, I think, one of the big things is you look at that 2018-2019 season. Me and you ended up going to a game there that year. Actually went to 2 games that season. They really played well in non-conference play. So if you're able to kind of run the table in non-conference play, maybe pick up a few wins in conference play, At least you might be able to get in as like a, as you mentioned, a CBI, NIT possibly type team, but you're going to have to grab some of these wins. I would say the one thing is, with their schedule this year, with the in conference schedule, it's not the most difficult in conference schedule. Like in terms of like, there's a lot of like winnable games on this schedule. Like we are very lucky to not have to play Houston twice. Now it's granted on the road, that's gonna be a lot tougher. Like if it was at home, it would have been nice to have it at home. But I mean, it's still, I mean, you look at their schedule, they play Tulsa twice. Tulsa's not going to be a very appealing team in the conference possibly this year. East Carolina, same thing as well. You got Wichita State, which are going to kind of be towards the bottom half from projection outlook, excuse me, of that. So you have winnable games in conference play, and you mentioned UCF as well and Cincinnati. You never know what you could do there with those teams as well. So it should be an interesting, conference schedule for this team when they get into that time period. But you look at, the non-conference slate here, Chris. I mean, you mentioned Auburn. You mentioned, I don't know if you mentioned Georgia. We might end up playing Georgia depending on how the Sunshine Slam tournament ends up playing out. But is there anybody non-conference wise you look at as, maybe teams to watch out for against us, or maybe teams that, we need, should be able to get the job done? It's not a difficult non-conference schedule. There's not a lot of big names on here, but there are, a few decent teams on here that we could have a run for our money for.
I'll tell you what, the only non-conference team we're projected to lose against is Auburn. All the other non-conference games we are projected to win, especially with quite a few of them being at home. But I want to point out, I think the opener against Southeast Missouri is going to be one to watch out for because it is the opener. Now we have an 84% chance to win, but USF scored 40 points in the paint last night.
Yeah.
And that was because Tampa didn't have very many big men. They had an Aaron Gordon lookalike who was very good. Otherwise, they didn't have much of a presence in the paint. Looking at this Hawks, the Red Hawks roster here, they are humongous. They have a 6'3" guard, a 7-foot forward, a 7-foot center, a 6'9" center, a 6'8" forward, a 6'7" forward, and another 7-foot center. Like this is like a crazy tall team, a crazy big team.
Yep.
And USF might be forced to shoot more threes than they want to. So I would not be surprised. I'm actually going to say right now, I don't think USF win that first game just because this is going to be a very intimidating team to go against. They might look at the name and be like, it's just, it's just Southeast Missouri or wherever it is. But they are a humongous team. They can roll a whole starting lineup of almost 7-footers if they really wanted to. And that could happen towards the end of the game if they need to be defensive. So that's one team to look out for. Of course, Auburn's one. UMass is an interesting one because we don't play them.
Yep.
Normally. But then some of the other ones like Stetson, as we mentioned.
Charleston Southern, St. Francis College.
Should be able to win those, but you never know.
I mean, and you got a team like Hofstra. Watch out for Hofstra, man. They're a team that has been competitive the last couple of years. I mean, they could be a team that, I mean, easily could find a way to, possibly, sneak a win against us. I mean, remember Hofstra, if I'm not mistaken, last season, if I pull up their standings last year, actually, they didn't have a great year last year, but I believe a few years ago, they were pretty dominant a few years back. So, hey, you never know about, the Hofstra pride, if you will, and maybe them sneaking a win here against us. But, yeah, I mean, you look at the non-conference schedule, man, it's not a difficult non-conference schedule. I mean, Auburn's your biggest one on the road. That's going to be, I think, a pretty exciting matchup. That'll be a really good test to see where they're at. You could possibly get Georgia, depending on, again, as I mentioned, how that Sunshine Slam tournament goes. That should be a very interesting tournament. Remember, you got UAB, and then, if they win that game, they would get Georgia or St. Joe's. And don't get me wrong, those are two very competitive schools as well. So you get a good neutral site, invitational, in-season kind of tournament that you get. So for the Bulls, again, if they can, kind of dominate, especially at home, because they only have 2 road games against Northern Iowa and Auburn in non-conference play this year. I mean, I think USF, again, they could possibly later on into the year sneak into the CPI and try to battle for at least something possibly. I don't know
Yeah.
if this team is a tournament team yet, but I feel like in maybe a year or two, this could be a team we might be talking about as having high aspirations, especially with a lot of the moves expecting to be made with the AAC and with some of these new teams coming in next year.
I'd say if they perform well against UAB, if they go against Georgia, whether we win or Georgia loses or something, and they can beat Georgia or be competitive against Georgia, that's certainly going to help. Like I said,
remember, UAB is going to be in the American next year.
Yeah,
that's a
so it's
future
also
opponent.
A preview, but I want to get your opinion there. Like I said, on the opening game, but okay. I was still looking at the sizes. So every single player pretty much outsizes, if that makes sense, USF. So USF have a severe size issue heading into this first game.
Yep.
I kind of want to, what do you think is going to happen there if we do have to shoot more than rely on the paint?
Well, it's going to be interesting. I mean, based off of what we saw last night, and if they shot the way they did last night from 3-point range, I do not have USF winning on Monday. I believe I actually could see. I do think maybe USF ends up dropping that game just because I do think it, with being the second game that this group has played against with each other, I think they might struggle. I think this team will start out 0-2. I would not be surprised at all with that. As you mentioned, the size definitely will become a factor. Luckily, you do have some size with PHS or not PHSC, with USF. Excuse me. You have some size with this team. So, in my opinion, I do think they drop it on Monday. I do think that the size does catches up to them a little bit. I think it's gonna be a very close game. I think it's gonna be a battle. I think it's gonna be similar to this UT game that they played. Not in terms of the way they played overall for the entirety of the game, but I do think that they will get a run for their money, similar to the way they did with the UT game yesterday. So I do think Southeast Missouri and USF will most likely get into a dogfight, and I'm going to say it will be 55-53. I'm going to go Southeast Missouri. It's going to be very close. I'm going to say low scoring too, especially with it being the first game of the year. And, I think it's just going to be a low scoring game, really a battle in the paint possibly. So it should be interesting. We'll see.
And in terms of form too, they're 3-2 in their last. I know it's different seasons and such, but
yeah.
Still.
And by the way, just another little neat fact here. This is the first time these two teams have played since 1996. So it has been a while since Southeast Missouri and USF have tipped off, if you will. And the last game was played in Missouri. The last time it was played in Tampa was in 95. So it's been a while since these two teams have met. So it'll be pretty cool to have kind of an older battle that these two teams had. I want to say a rivalry renewed, but it'll definitely be a series, if you will, renewed for these two schools, which will be neat to see. I like stuff like that.
So. We are projected to win 70-55, but as you mentioned, I think it'll be a lot closer, especially with the size.
Yeah.
But 15-point advantage is probably a bit too much for USF. It is home though.
Definitely cover. Definitely cover.
Oh yeah, definitely. But you're obviously not surprised though if USF win this game.
No.
But it's one of the situations where you wouldn't be surprised if they drop it. It's what happens a lot against the out of conference teams.
Yeah, it definitely is going to be interesting to see how they do here in this out of conference game against Southeast Missouri, which is a very weird home opener. We don't home open, it feels like, against these type of schools. I feel like we've home open against Florida teams like your Bethunes and your Stetsons and your those type of smaller schools in the world, if you will. I feel like we never home open against a weird kind of a middle West type team. So it's interesting to see that this is the home opener. And another thing I was going to mention too is you look at some of the other home or openers that some of these other teams have, like FAMU is heading out west to play like Oregon or something, and North Florida is playing like Gonzaga this upcoming week. I'm like, where are these what are these openers for some of these schools in here in Florida, man? And Jacksonville's playing Duke on like Tuesday or Monday, so a lot of interesting home openers for some of these major schools against some Florida schools. So should be interesting, man. USF's got a interesting non-conference schedule ahead of them. Again, we kind of made our prediction for Monday. What's your season prediction? Where do you see them finishing out here? I guess to kind of close out the show, if you will.
Yeah, so they're projected 14 and 15. Personally, that's a bit too high. It's going to be a building year, of course, trying to figure everything out. I think they struggle in the conference. Specifically, they're projected 6 and 11. I can see that maybe just being 4 or 5 wins. You got tough road games. Like I said, you're going to have to steal a few. But I do think we take care of business on these out-of-conference games. We'll drop 1 or 2 of them, but at the end of the day, we're going to win most of these out-of-conference games with our experience, with our, quality of players. Not the highest quality, but it's, of course, a good enough quality to beat these other teams like, Stetson and Austin and, whatever. But I'll say 11 wins, 11 and 18. Of course, there might be more games depending on, like I said, Sunshine Slam. So we have to account for that for the 30th game. So 11 or 12, I'll say, a little bit under the projection.
This is going to be tough, man. This is a tough prediction to make here because USF right now, as you mentioned, 14 wins, 15 losses. Pretty respectable in terms of projection. I do think they'll be better than Tulsa and East Carolina. If I were to take the over-under on 14.2, basically just 14 wins over-under, if I were to take the over-under there, I will probably go the under just in case, just because knowing the history of this program and feels like we've sometimes underperformed. I will go the under, but I do have a lot of upside with this program. I do think there's a lot of positive things happening with the USF men's basketball team and Brian Gregory. Remember, Brian Gregory is no spring chicken with this program. This is his 6th season as the head coach here at USF. Kind of wondering how long he's got in terms of a tenure because, you look at Jeff Scott, he hasn't performed very well. Brian Gregory, really, outside of like one season he had in 2018, 2019, winning the CBI, USF hasn't done much of anything in terms of their college basketball program. So maybe this will be the year. Maybe Brian Gregory will get him back to the tournament, which it's been a while. The women's team has been there recently. They've had some success. Maybe he'll rub off the men's team here coming into 2022, 2023.
Yeah, and I think they'll miss the American tournament.
Well, they can make the tournament. They'll make the tournament regardless, but they just won't. They can't win. They might lose in like the first.
They're gonna get stuck playing Houston more than likely, and it's gonna be a very, very much a long shot. I don't know if they make it to the quarterfinals. They're projected 54% chance to make it to the 8, but I don't know. It's going to be tough because, I'm sure many Tulsa and ECU fans are looking at their projection and saying, we're better than 4 and 14 in the conference or 6 wins. So it's also dependent on how these other teams do. Where if the entire American fails to perform and there's like a big 3 or something, or just Houston, Memphis, Cincinnati, maybe they all dominate. So there's kind of a lot at the top, and then in the middle and bottom is all open, then maybe you can make it to the quarterfinals and stuff.
Yeah. And I will say one thing is too, by the way, is that the best season Brian Gregory did have as the coach of the USF Bulls is 2018, 2019, 24-14 record that year. Other than that, he has not had a winning season out of the other 4 different seasons he has coached for this team. So not very appealing in terms of that, though he does have a winning record in his career, but he also did coach at Georgia Tech. He coached at a very good Dayton program. So he had some success at some other schools before jumping in with the USF Bulls. So we will see, man. It should be interesting. Hopefully the Bulls will be able to maybe find some magic, if you will, this season. Maybe get some of these transfers going and kind of mix them in with some of these already transferred over USF products that have been with us for last year or two. So we'll see, man. It should be very interesting. So again, excited for home opener Monday night, Southeast Missouri State. I guess for fans out there, I'll go through before I let you go. I'll go through the non-conference slate for everybody who's interested in it. I won't go through the conference slate, but for the people who are interested in the non-conference slate, uh, Chris, I don't know if you also wanted to, or do you want to just go back and forth with it, or do you want to read it off maybe?
Yeah, sure. I'll read it off. So, obviously, we did Tampa. We got Southeast Missouri State at home. We have Auburn on only 3 days rest on the road. That'll be a tough one. Then you have Stetson at home. It's again another tough game. Then you go to the Sunshine Slam, where you have Austin P at this one's at home. The only home game of the Sunshine Slam. Mm-hmm. Then 3 days later, you have a game in Daytona against Wade B. That will be on CBS Sports Network. So you can actually watch that game if you're on ESPN Plus member. Then we have either Georgia or St. Joseph. I'm sure most people want us to play Georgia, but St. Joseph might be the easier game to get a win in.
And St. Joe's is in no slouch.
That's the very next day, so just keep that in mind. Then we have St. Francis, as you mentioned, not a slouch either. That's a 2:00 game on a Friday at home. Then you have UMass, which is, of course, a very exciting game. That one, another home game for us. 2 days off. Then you play Charleston Southern at home. So a lot of these games are at home. Then you play on 10 days rest, Cedar Falls, Iowa, Northern Iowa on the road Monday night. Then you play Dartmouth at home 3 days later. Hofstra 2 days later, of 2 days of rest at home once again. So, and we actually finished that off with a 3-game homestand of these out of conferences. NJIT Thursday night, and then that's after that we have our conference play, which, as you mentioned, we only play Houston once, but not an easy conference schedule in total, but can get a few games stolen.
Yeah, very fortunate that we have a lot of home games, so there's a lot of home action to be watched here at the Yuengling Center. November alone, I believe, has 6 home games on the slate, and then you got December with featuring, I believe, 4, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 4: Charleston Southern, Dartmouth, Hofstra, and NJIT. As for me, in terms of coverage, I will be at the Southeast Missouri State game on Monday. That is guaranteed. And I'll also be covering the Moorhead State game for the USF women's basketball team as well. Should be a fun night of basketball on Monday evening. We got the Stetson game I should be at. I'll definitely be at the UMass game. I'll try to be at the Hofstra game as well. So I'll be at a couple games here in the season. So that will do it for us. For me, Dylan Spaulding. For my partner, Chris Everidge, the USF Insider / season ticket holder member as well. We're very excited for Monday. That will wrap things up, though, for us. We will see you guys in our next episode. Peace out, guys, and we will see you next time here on FL Teams.